The head of Ontario's Vaccination Distribution Task Force says it was a mistake to close vaccine clinics in the province over Christmas and Boxing Day. But more doses are coming and vaccinations have resumed. Retired General Rick Hillier also acknowledged they are not getting the shots they do have out quickly enough.
In hindsight, it was the wrong decision. I think I acknowledge that quite clearly and accept the responsibility that we'll get better faster now, because we've learned from that, and we've heard the voices of the people of Ontario saying, get on with this, and that's what we are going to do. What I agreed to was that out in the long-term care homes and out in the retirement homes, you've got staffs who have been running flat out for 10 months, looking after the patients that they love so much, that they've looked after so well to the best of their ability, and they've been looking after them for 10 months now almost, and over the Christmas period, there was some sort of downsizing in the number of people who would be on duty in those homes and therefore available to come in for vaccines. Now, of course, as you understand, we can't just take everybody from a home, bring them to a vaccination center and leave the residents of that home unattended. So it's always difficult to get the right percentage away for vaccinations. When the homes are staffed by less people for a couple of days there, it's even more difficult, sometimes impossible. So we made the decision that over those 2 days, we would not run the clinics, and then we would just go faster as quickly as possible and catch up, which is exactly what we're doing today.
The CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick is tracking developments for us from Toronto. So, Megan, what more have we learned about Ontario's vaccine rollout?
Well, we will learn they won't be taking any more days off, Andrew, which is what Rick Hillier acknowledged there, saying, in hindsight, it was the wrong decision to pause the clinics for those 2 days. And then he also gave us some details on where Ontario is at as of today in terms of the vaccine rollout, saying more than 14,000 people have now been vaccinated. They're operating at 19 sites, and he said they do have plans to ramp up to 23 sites in the days and weeks ahead. He detailed some of the shipments of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine that they're expecting to keep coming in, as well as the arrival of the second vaccine to be approved in Canada, the Moderna vaccine. He said they do expect that to arrive in Ontario in the next 24 hours, and then they would start vaccinating people with it within about 48 hours. So a bit of a delay there in terms of when they will actually start using that one, but it will be used in long-term care homes, he confirmed. Right now, they're looking at using it to start with in just one to three homes, and they'll sort of do a bit of a test run, just like they did with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. They'll then write what he calls a playbook in terms of what went right and what went wrong with the administration of that vaccine that will then be sent out to the other sites that will use the Moderna vaccine. One interesting thing about the Moderna vaccine we heard from Rick Hillier, Andrew, was him saying he'd like Health Canada to consider making it just a one-dose vaccine instead of the current schedule with it, which is to have one shot and then a second shot about 28 days later, just like the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is one shot and then the second shot about 21 days later. Here's what Rick Hillier said about that request to Health Canada.
I'm not asking Health Canada to change the Moderna from a two-shot vaccine to a one-shot vaccine. What I'm asking is Health Canada have a look at doing that and saying maybe with the high efficiency that protects you in the first needle, it would be best for the entire population if we went just with a one-shot vaccination program with Moderna. I asked them to have a look at that. I don't know what the answer might be, and it might come back that they're not going to look at it. It might come back that they've looked and it doesn't work, or they might come back and say, we've looked and it does work and we'll go with a one shot, and that would allow us to vaccinate with a high level of protection, a very high level of protection, many more people much more quickly.
So that was a bit of news from Rick Hillier there in terms of his request to Health Canada, Andrew. He said with the Moderna vaccine, too, that the plan to roll it out does not only include long-term care homes in Ontario, but also some First Nations communities in Northern Ontario, that they do plan on using it in those communities. And so there's a task force responsible for the planning of that, and that will be underway in this first phase of the Moderna vaccine as well. He also laid out a bit more of a timeline for the rest of the vaccine program. saying right now we're in phase 1. He expects that to keep going until the end of March. Again, mostly targeting long-term care home workers and residents, and that would amount to about 1 million or so Ontarians being vaccinated. Then phase 2 would start in April, he predicted. And he says by that time, Ontario expects to have millions and millions of doses of both vaccines, and that they would expect to vaccinate about 7.5 million Ontarians in that second phase. Who? Which Ontarians? He said the task force has not determined the priority list for phases 2 and 3, that they will be making recommendations to Premier Doug Ford and his government as to who will get it next. But he did sort of float the idea that it would include more essential workers like paramedics and firefighters, he said, and then perhaps looking at some age groups, like starting with Ontarians 75 and older who do not live in resident retirement homes or long-term care homes. And he also talked about where it might be administered. He mentioned the idea of using pharmacies and mobile vaccination clinics. Again, none of this has been confirmed. This is just part of the planning process. So we'll see how it continues to play out. And then phase 3 would be later in the summer when the vaccine would be available to more Ontarians. So some details from Hillier there on where we're at and where we're going. And again, an acknowledgement, it's not going as fast as he would like. And that is part of his request, it seems, to Health Canada to consider the idea of Moderna just being a one-shot vaccine instead of 2.
All right, Megan, thank you. The CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick in Toronto.